China will stage a massive military parade on September 3rd to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory of China against Japan in World War II. 26 foreign leaders will attend China's Victory Day commemorations in Beijing, including leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, like Russian President Vladimir Putin, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, Tajik President Emomali Rahmon, Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov, and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. President Xi Jinping will deliver a speech at the gathering and review troops. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Mohammad Osman. He's an international relations specialist, joins us live from Cairo, and Andrew KP Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from London, as well as Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical analyst, joins us live from London. First, Osman, I would like to come to you for my question. Welcome to NewsX World to all our guests. And Osman, both China and Japan carry deep historical experiences from World War II. But looking ahead, how can these two countries transform these commemorations of the past into opportunities for mutual understanding and reconciliation?
Thank you for having me. Greetings to you and to your guests and to your honorable audience. It seems that even though 80 years stand between Japan's surrender to the Allies and China's grand military parade in a few days celebrating that very occasion, it seems that the state of tensions and even borderline enmity between Japan and China did not entirely dissipate in these long years, because unfortunately, Japan is embroiled in the dynamics of geopolitical tensions between the United States on the one hand and China and even Russia. On the other hand, Japan was propped up by the West in general during the Cold War, for it to be, especially after the Korean War, as a bulwark that will be poised to compete with any rising Chinese power at any point of time that the West viewed back then and still does right now as a threat. They do not view the rise of China as something that should be viewed as the natural progression of nations and of the developing world in general and the nations of the global South. It is rather seen as something that threatens US hegemony and Western hegemony. So therefore, unfortunately, right now, the tensions between Japan and China are almost unprecedented in years. Unfortunately, Japan is entrenching itself within a structure of alliances in East and South Asia that is designed to contain China one way or the other. So I think that this will not serve to find common grounds or further any state of strategic dialogue between both Tokyo and Beijing in this point. Because if it was otherwise, we would have seen Japan, for example, invited to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization conference, for example, even though they're not a member or not an observer and not a dialogue partner of the international organization. Yet, had they been interested in integrating themselves in the global South, maybe, and they are part of the global South, whether they like it or not, they might have found better grounds to establish better relations with China and many other countries. However, this is not the case. And we see the case of India, for example. India has its own big differences with China. However, this never prevented India from engaging in constructive dialogue and committing itself to the agenda of multipolarity and reinforcing multilateralism and opposing or trying to counter the unilateralism of the monopolar world order.
Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing that. Andrew, now I would like to come to you for this discussion. What's your take? Now, how can these two countries transform the past into opportunities ahead?
Of course, Japan has never apologized for its war crimes or its aggression of the Second World War to China. Is trying to adopt a more nuanced narrative. But on the other hand, there is a rising nationalism in Japan as well, which fits into actions to revise its own constitution, which was, of course, imposed on Japan after the Second World War, preventing it from developing its military. So the right-wing factions in Japan, and along with the rising nationalism, they wanted Japan to behave like a normal country, reinforcing its armament and also military expenditure. And that fits into America's China containment policy, using Japan as a pawn to contain China in the so-called first island chain centered in Okinawa with a lot of American assets, the second island chain centered in Guam, and then also cajoling South Korea to join Japan into a sort of Asian Pacific containment strategy. The north of the Asian Pacific and the south, of course, involving India and also Australia and the so-called Quad against China. So you can see that there are a number of important factors involved, which poison the relationship between India and Japan. But on the other hand, with Trump 2.0, upended the American-led rule-based order, which was founded by the United States after the Second World War, and also disrupting international trade and so on. So Japan is now trying to find its own path, but it's more aligned with the interests of the United States rather than with the interests of China.
And keeping that in mind, Mark, I would like to come to you for this discussion now. How do you think, so our first guest, Muhammad, has mentioned that they have, even though Japan acts like it, sometimes acts like it's not in South Asia, it is in South Asia, and it has to look for more friends there. And also, Andrew, our other guests, have mentioned that Japan has never apologized to China for the World War II atrocities. So what's your take? How do you think these two countries can transform, or can they transform this past into opportunities for mutual understanding?
I think Mohammed and Andrew's comments are excellent. And as Andrew has referred to, we are talking about history. We often forget when we're sitting here as commentators, given a few minutes, that there is a massive arc to paint. And Andrew has done that exceptionally well. Of course, in regard to looking at that history, the history of the Japan invasion, invading China, etc. And it's then bringing Japan to the table after during the end of the Second World War by dropping atomic bombs. We have to remember this, and as Andrew has pointed out, they then have a complete different juxtaposition. They're not allowed to then arm, etc. They then become part of what we would then call the Western homogeny, America influence down there in that part of the world. Absolutely right. Azumi, you make a very interesting comment when they wish to seek friends who they can align with, who they cannot. How can they push certain barriers when as Andrew's pointed out, there are American bases, and the relationship between Japan and America, and of course the American hegemony is turning around and saying, well, we need their support there, and to also be supported by them. We also have to remember where the Japan economy at times has been from 1989, and
Yes.
at times it's been financially extremely challenging. We also have to remember their incredible prowess in regard to manufacturing and what they have exported. And with that kind of mindset, that, as you
Yes.
say, they are then looking for friends in the area. And
Yes.
at times that is extremely difficult when we talk about history. but actually people actually talking to each other and getting around the table to actually talk about trade than actually talking about war, then that must always be a good thing. Asuma.
Yes, thank you very much to all our guests for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion. Now we stay